Hello and welcome to the radiotimes.com Doctor Who podcast, which definitely needs a shorter title. I'm Hugh Fullerton.
I'm Morgan Jeffrey, and this week we're talking about Doctor Who, no surprise there, but not quite Doctor Who as you know it. So recently on BritBox, the streaming platform, of course, they've been the UK home to classic Doctor Who for a little while now, but they've recently made a new addition to their service, the two Dalek movies from the 1960s, which starred Peter Cushing as Doctor Who, not the Doctor, Doctor Who specifically. And Hugh, I understand you have a rather shocking confession to make.
I do. I'm going to be ostracised from Doctor Who circles for this. I haven't seen the Doctor Who Daleks movies. I was thinking that this could be my chance to catch up, but you know what? There's so much to catch up on with Doctor Who. There's classic episodes. I still haven't seen all of those. I mean, some of them are missing, to be fair. And, there's like spin-off media, there's, big Finish audio dramas, all this. And now there's these things which aren't even canon. I mean, whatever's canon of that stuff I just described is up for a different debate. I mean, so I guess, Morgan, as someone who's seen these films, how would you describe them to me? I have an impression of them, right, which is Peter Cushing. Here's what I know about them. Peter Cushing is Doctor Who, like you said. The TARDIS looks a bit different.
A little bit, yeah.
Yeah, it's sort of more like he's explicitly a human scientist who's made it, and Daleks are in it.
That's the extent of your knowledge.
Yeah, I think I thought I knew more about it as I started speaking, but as time has gone on, yeah, I feel like that's the broad strokes.
Those are the crux. Yeah, that's the crux. No, so what happened was in the very early '60s, actually. So Doctor Who hadn't actually been on air for much longer than a year, I think, at this point. Amicus, film producers Amicus, they bought an option to remake the Dalek stories. They bought the rights from the BBC and Terry Nation for the princely sum of £500. They actually bought the rights to make three movies based on the first three Dalek stories, because Dalek mania had hit Britain. Kids were obsessed with not specifically Doctor Who even, but very specifically the Daleks. And so they saw an opportunity there. And so there were two films released across the space of 2 years. So first of all was Doctor Who and the Daleks, which was released on the 25th of June, 1965. And then there was the sequel, Daleks Invasion Earth 2150 AD, which was released a little over a year later on the 5th of August, 1966. And they tell roughly the same stories as the TV versions. So in Doctor Who and the Daleks, the Doctor and his companions travel to the planet Skaro for the first time. They encounter the Daleks for the first time. They encourage the pacifist Thals to stand up against their oppressors, the Daleks. And then in Daleks Invasion Earth 2150 AD, the Doctor leads a resistance group against the Daleks who, surprise, surprise, have invaded the Earth. Slight spoiler there in the title. And these stories, they are Doctor Who, sort of, but they're also unlike any other bit of Doctor Who out there. And yet they sort of capture the fun and the spirit of adventure that is Doctor Who at its best, I think.
So, I mean, when you say it's like Doctor Who, but not like Doctor Who, do you mean just it's explicitly set in a different way, or are there like differences in the way the story is told?
So the stories are told, that they're relatively faithful, I would say. Not to say that Doctor Who is not family friendly. I would say these are even more kid friendly than the original stories. I mean, it's interesting to see these stories that were originally filmed in a sort of pokey BBC studio in moody black and white, and they're now transferred to Technicolor film. So the films look amazing visually, but also that gives them a sort of shinier, brighter feel. There's also a few examples, I think particularly in the first movie, of characters who were killed off in the TV version that survive in the films. They're also quite substantially lighter in tone, because I think you as opposed to William Hartnell's quite irascible, famously irascible, quite grumpy, sometimes quite severe first Doctor, particularly in the Daleks, the TV story that the first Peter Cushing movie is based on, the Doctor's still still in the early stages of development, still quite irascible, still quite grumpy. And then Peter Cushing's Doctor Who, which is actually his name, is very different. He's in no way alien. Like he is very, like he's literally human, but he's also very, very sort of human, and he's very warm and affable, and he's just the eccentric scientist who lives in a cottage in England. So there's those differences as well. It feels brighter as well because of the sort of sunnier disposition of the protagonist.
So I'm really sure I'm ignorant here, but who are the companions in this? Is it still Ian and Barbara and Susan, or is it kind of done differently?
No, well, in the first movie, in Doctor Who and the Daleks, it is Ian and Barbara and Susan, but done very differently. So Susan or Susie is played by Roberta Tovey, who I think was about 12 at the time, which is obviously a contrast because Carole Ann Ford was a sort of older teenage Susan. And so you have this sort of young girl as a companion, which is interesting because it's not really anything you've seen ever in TV Doctor Who. You hadn't seen it at the time. You've definitely not seen it since. And again, that gives it a kind of more of a children's movie feel, that one of the protagonists is a young child, and you sort of experience the wonders of Skaro. I'm not sure if that's quite the right way of putting it, but you experience this first trip to an alien planet through the eyes of a child. So it has that kind of that sort of innocence to it as well, and also because Susan is younger, it allows Peter Cushing's Doctor to really he really plays up to that grandfather role. He's kind of the affable, lovable grandfather who cares for his small grandchild. And then you've got Barbara, played by Jenny Linden, who in this interpretation is also Doctor Who's granddaughter, Barbara Who.
You're joking? Her name's Barbara Who.
No, well, he is definitely a man called Doctor Who. He says, "Hello, my name is Doctor Who," and it's apparently in reference material at the time. It's sort of stated that Susan's name is Susan Who. So I'm going to assume that Barbara is also called Barbara Who. And then you've got Ian, but whereas TV Ian is very much the kind of straight shooting, square jawed teacher figure, quite straight laced. Ian here is played by Roy Castle of Record Breakers fame, and is far more sort of comic relief. Again, there's far more humor, I would say, in these movies. Certainly in the first one, than in the second one, than there are in their TV equivalents.
And then are they in the second one as well? Those three.
So Doctor Who and Susie Who return for the second one, but Barbara Who does not return. She is swapped out for Doctor Who's niece, Louise, who I'm not sure if her last name is Louise Who, but she's played by Jill Curzon. And then
it depends which side of the family she came from. yeah,
possibly. And then Ian is swapped out for an original character who's a policeman called Tom Campbell, who was played, do you know who by?
I think was it Bernard Cribbins?
It was Bernard Cribbins.
Yes,
yeah.
I did know that. Yes, making
his first foray into Doctor Whodom, and he would of course later return, I think over 40 years later, to play Wilfred Mott in the TV series.
I'm quite pleased I got that. I think it was just you saying it. I was like, it was there somewhere that he'd had some involvement before. Yeah.
But I think it's funny because I think we were talking in a previous episode about the potential for a Doctor Who reboot, right? And how if the show ever broke away from its established continuity, there would sort of be no going back. And we're lucky that the show has always, when it's come back in like 2005, that it maintained that sense of continuity, that it was all one long story. And I think I said at the time, if it ever did a reboot, there'd be no going back. But of course, we did have a Doctor Who reboot in 1965, and fans just accepted that it was something different. I think now fandom has evolved in such a way that a different continuity wouldn't be as readily accepted. You've got, if you imagine now, if there was a Doctor Who film with a different actor to the one playing it on television, the Doctor's human, which in 1964, 1965, you might not have known where the Doctor was from, but you were pretty sure that he was an alien. Again, not to stress the point, but his name is literally Doctor Who. There's none of the famous theme tune. There'd be outcry, right, if something like that happened today.
You say that, but you do have things like the Flash TV series and the Flash on screen, who are the same character but completely different origin stories. You do have different Batmen running around.
True. I feel like Doctor Who fandom is especially.
I think it's a little different.
Like we hold the core tenets of Doctor Who very close to our hearts.
And the core tenets.
Yeah, the core tenets. And so I feel like anything that breaks away from what we consider to be essential to Doctor Who, I don't think it would be as readily accepted.
I guess
now.
it's a little
But of course
different in that they're both the thing I mentioned there, the CW thing and the Warner Bros. Movies, they are both adaptations of a separate text, if you look at it in that way, whereas the TV series is the original, and then any sort of film or reboot or something is building off that. So it's a little different. Like you're used to there being different versions of superheroes and stuff, I guess.
Yeah, I think for Doctor Who fans, these films, if you take them on their own merit, if you don't compare them to, don't expect them to be strict translations of the TV series and kind of enjoy them on their own merits, I actually think they're a lot of fun, because they do sometimes come across like someone, read a plot synopsis of the original stories and sort of the format of Doctor Who, and didn't actually watch it, and kind of like sort of, so they get some things wrong and they get some things right, and it just sort of plays out that way. So like, not only is his name again literally Doctor Who, but he calls his ship TARDIS, not the TARDIS, but TARDIS.
Yes.
So he says like, "I am Doctor Who, and welcome to TARDIS." And the TARDIS is a police box. No explanation given as to why, because it's implied that Doctor Who built his own time machine. So quite why he decided to disguise it as a police box in the garden in his cottage, never really explained. But the inside of it is much less impressive than the TV version. For all my talk of this movie version, these movie versions have bigger budgets and they're a lot glossier than the TV versions, which they are. The inside of the TARDIS is pretty much a shambles. Like, it looks like someone's slightly eccentric garage, essentially.
It is still big on the inside, though.
It is, but like a bit. It's sort of like the size of someone's living room. Right. So it's like, if you walked in, you'd be like, that's a bit bigger. That's cool. It doesn't quite have the wow factor of the original TARDIS. But one thing it does have, interestingly, is you can see the exterior police box doors reflected in the interior, which is something that the TV series didn't do at the time, and didn't do until 2005 when the series came back with Rose, and then that innovation crossed over. And there are a few things that these movies did that later, people sort of forget this, that later became part of the fabric of the TV series. So the Daleks I think it's in the second film, they count down using rels, which that was then later on adopted by first by the comics, Doctor Who comics, and then by the TV series. So there's certain things in these films that have become sort of TV canon as well.
See, I didn't know that. That's interesting. I knew about the doors. I remember that. You reminded me of the little things I do know. There was one thing I remembered about this, which is that they sort of did try to make it in a way canonical, or at least put it into continuity in the Day of the Doctor, didn't they? Because if I believe the original plan was in the Black Archive, the Unit Black Archive, there were going to be posters of these films with the suggestion that like someone made a film about the Doctor, played by Peter Cushing, and obviously got some of the details wrong. So it's kind of like it's like how in Last Christmas, Faye Marseille can want to watch Game of Thrones despite being in Game of Thrones, kind of thing. But then they couldn't get the rights to the posters or something. So
because the BBC don't own them. Yeah, right. So I think Stephen Moffat, being a massive geek, as we all are, he wanted to kind of, in some way, bring these Dalek movies into canon. And so, as you said, he planned them to be movies within the kind of the fictional world of Doctor Who that someone had based on the Doctor's quote unquote real adventures, and got a few of the details wrong, which I think is fun. And then, for sort of logistical reasons, they couldn't do it in the Day of the Doctor, but then it's in the novelization, I think.
It is. He writes it in, like, because you can describe a poster, fairly copyright free. It's just showing a picture of it is a bit more of a challenge.
But there's been a few different takes on how exactly these Dalek movies fit into canon. So I think like there's also been like comic strips and books, and like some people have suggested that this is a Doctor from an alternate universe, and then other works have suggested that they're sort of that they're acts of fiction, sort of similar to the Mind Robber from the classic Doctor Who series. How it's these are sort of fictitious interpretations of again quote unquote real adventures. There's also we've got the possibility now. Could Peter Cushing be a pre-Hartnell Doctor? Don't rule it out.
That's true. Another comedian arch thing going on.
Yeah, he just has like similar adventures later on in his life that he doesn't remember, obviously, and they're just sort of like slightly more downbeat, a bit more grubby versions of these adventures he had previously. One thing I came up with, which I quite like the idea of, is that maybe these movies maybe Peter Cushing is like Brendan, and these are sort of like warped versions of the Doctor's experiences in the Matrix. And again, they're sort of, they've gone through some kind of weird Matrix filter, and that's why they're not quite right. In the same way that like what Brendan was experiencing was sort of what the Doctor went through, but under some kind of under some kind of data mask or whatever.
This reminds me of at the Radio Times covers party earlier this year. I was talking to Mark Gatiss about the Timeless Children or whatever, and he basically said a friend of his came up with a reason that in Starfleet officers could wear makeup if they were going to certain events, to try and explain why William Shatner is clearly wearing makeup in so many scenes, like an eyeliner and stuff. And he was like, wrote it into like, oh yeah, this would be like what the Starfleet code is. Whereas trying to sort of fit this into canon kind of reminds me of that. It's like, sometimes William Shatner just wears makeup. We just got to
sometimes you just need to let it go. That's the thing. Well, that's the thing with these films. I think they are just, I think they're just an interesting curio. Like I think it's fine that you've not seen them. I forgive you.
Well, that was my next question. Because like, do I need to see them? Do you think? Should I watch them?
I think you should watch them, but because they're a lot of fun. Like, I don't feel like even if you're sort of a completist Doctor Who fan, I don't feel like they're required viewing necessarily, because they are so different and they kind of sit outside. They wonderfully kind of sit outside the canon. Like I say, there's nothing else quite like them. But if you like Doctor Who, I think you'll like these. Like they're not quite right, but they are a couple of like fun adventure movies with some Daleks in them, and the Daleks as well. Like, talking about the production values, the Daleks in both these movies are one of the sort of the high points, because again, having that slightly higher budget, the Dalek models are slightly bigger. They've got this sort of slightly more prominent flashing lights instead of the kind of the traditional laser guns. They have sort of fire extinguisher guns that shoot CO2. And they sort of envelop their enemies in a deadly smoke, which is actually way more effective than it sounds. And some of them have sort of like metal pincer arms instead of the zinc plunger. So I think the Dalek design actually, and they're a little bit bigger as well, a little bit bulkier. So they really kind of have that sense of weight and presence. They certainly look more sturdy than the TV Daleks of the time did.
I mean, you said that they could have made a third one of these, given everything you've said. I mean, I don't actually know, were they popular? Could they have made another one? What happened there?
Yeah, so Amicus, they bought an option to make those first 3 Dalek stories, again, from Terra Nation, the BBC. They bought the rights to make 3 of them. But I think, essentially, the second movie, Daleks Invasion of 2150 AD, just didn't make enough money at the box office. So they were planning a third movie to be based on The Chase, which is the third Dalek story, but it was just scrapped because the second film underperformed at the box office. However, Peter Cushing did apparently play the Doctor Who, again in a pilot for a Doctor Who radio drama, which was never picked up to series, and the recordings have now been lost. I don't know if that's an urban legend or if it actually happened. Apparently, they originally approached Boris Karloff of Frankenstein's monster fame to play the Doctor, and he turned them down. So then they decided to go to Peter Cushing. And because those recordings are lost, no one knows if it was kind of like a different take on Doctor Who again, with where he was just playing the Doctor, or if it was a kind of reprisal of the movies where he was specifically playing Doctor Who. So yeah, it's a little sort of, again, another little lost curio. We'll never hear the third or see the third outing for Peter Cushing's Doctor Who.
I mean, I can imagine the crew at Big Finish just tooling up for a national treasure style hunt for those Peter Cushing recordings, which might exist somewhere.
Sadly, of course, Peter Cushing has long since left us, but you can get John Coleshaw in to do a Peter Cushing impression, and surely do like the Doctor Who box set. Come on, Big Finish.
Get Guy Henry. Guy Henry was Peter Cushing in Rogue One, Star Wars movie.
You go.
He did a Peter Cushing impression for that film. It was his own voice. So, get it going. You charge us. Don't charge us, pay us for the idea. I think you might want to charge us for the idea.
It's an idea so bad, we'll charge you.
But what do you people listening at home think about the Peter Cushing movies? Have you seen them? Am I going to be cast out by you for not having seen them myself? Or, is this something you've been putting off and now thinking about watching? Let us know. We have loads of Doctor Who content on radiotimes.com for you to read as well. We have an ongoing vote for your favourite Doctor. Peter Cushing, sadly, not included because he doesn't count as a real one, but we may include him in a future poll. You never know. And we also have lots of new Doctor Who news about season 13 and filming and stuff like that, which we will kind of give you more details on this podcast in due course. Until then, I've been Hugh Fullerton.
I've been Morgan Who.
And this has been a podcast with too long a name. Goodbye.